This is a big group to come listen to assessors speak. I actually feel like this is almost like a mob. We don't get that many people that come and talk to us, want to come listen to assessors that often.
Make it much easier for the speakers if folks at the back are going to come closer up front. It's going to look much better in the pictures too, so come closer.
That's right, and then it'll look like it was very heavily attended, and we want to come back next year, right? Okay. My name is Paul Peterson. I am the assessor for Maricopa County. I'm also the president of the Arizona Association of Counties this year, which is one of the reasons I'm attending this conference. Although I was talking to Randy and IAAO, which is the International Association of Assessing Officers, just joined up with NACo last year. So we're hopeful that we'll have more assessors that will attend these conferences in the future. How many of you are assessors or work for an assessor's office? Yeah, I see one of my friends back there. There's a few of you. All right, good. I'll just tell a little joke. You know, we're always put upon, assessors. We're tax people, all right? So it's kind of a bad word sometimes. And, you know, we can't catch a break. You know, other elected officials can have their job titles abbreviated. Representative is REP, senator is SEN, commissioner COM. You can't do that for assessor, you know? It just doesn't work. People might want to call us that from time to time, but, you know, we learn to persevere, right, Randy?
That's right.
So the name of this,
Can I just make a quick comment?
yes, you can.
Years ago, my son was in high school at the time. He said, you know, Dad, the only one. Years ago, this is quite a while ago, probably about 12 or 13 years ago. My son, he was in high school, and at the time we were going someplace, and he said, you know, Dad, of all my friends, you're the only person whose job starts out spelling ASS.
All right. Can you hear me better? I can project if I need to. All right. I've already introduced myself. The name of this workshop is Investing in County Priorities, Strategies for Effective Property Tax Administration. I'm happy to see some of you here. The NACo staff liaison, his name is Andrew Hartzig. I actually knew Andrew when he worked for ACO a few years ago. I'm just happy to reconnect with him. He's in the back if you need anything. All right, so turn off your cell phones. If you need to take a call, take it outside. We're recording this session, just FYI. And we will take questions. Me and Randy are happy to do that. We'll do it at the end. So, as you all know, property tax is the main general revenue source for the majority of counties in the country. For some counties, it's more than 50%. In Maricopa County, I was looking at the numbers just earlier today, and it's about 25 to 30% of the revenues in Maricopa County. Maricopa County is a very large taxing jurisdiction. We administer 1.7 million parcels. So if you think about that, it's the fourth largest jurisdiction from a parcel count and a people count in the country. It's also one of the largest by land size. It's larger than like 6 states. But that, you know, property tax administration is the same whether it's Maricopa County, which I just told you about, or Greenlee County, which has 3,000 parcels, and that's in Arizona too. So still the strategies are the same. We're going to talk today about effective property tax administration, terminology, and best practices and valuation methods. The goal is to cover principles of high quality, cost-effective property tax systems with an emphasis on the critical nature of accurate data. We'll also highlight effective online information and research tools for taxpayers to assist in the public's understanding of calculating property taxes and dealing with appeals. And we will welcome questions. And now it's my honor and privilege to introduce to you Randy Ripperger. Sorry, Randy, get your name right. He's the president of IAAO this year, and he serves on the board of directors for the National Association of Counties. He's currently the Polk County Assessor in Des Moines, Iowa, and he's worked for the Polk County Assessor's Office in various positions since 1980. Is that right? I was in kindergarten in 1980. So that's pretty impressive. He has the Certified Assessment Evaluator. It's called the CAE designation from IAAO, and is a Certified General Real Property Appraiser in the state of Iowa. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in economics from Central College in, how do I pronounce that? Is it Pella or Pella? Pella, Iowa. Sorry, I'm from Arizona, so we pronounce things differently. You know, it's quesadilla, not quesadilla. Okay. Now a little personal information. I'm going to turn over to Randy. His favorite drink, martini, shaken not served, with 3 olives. Is that right? His favorite sports team, Chicago Blackhawks. Chicago's fun, coming from Des Moines. His favorite shoe is a Converse high-top Chuck Taylor All-Stars in black. You're pretty impressed that I know this. His favorite vehicle is a John Deere 4020. I don't even know what that is.
I have no idea.
Really? You don't know either? I got that one wrong. And his favorite job is the one he has, because that's what where he's worked for his entire life. So without further introduction, I'm going to let Randy take it away.
Wow, thanks, Paul. Our vice president this year on the IAAO executive board is the chief deputy for Paul, so I think that last part all came from Tim. Thanks for showing up this afternoon. I was a little concerned when we have the matched up against the Hill visits this afternoon too. We might be down on the attendance a little bit, but thanks for coming. Before I get started, I really want to talk about the IAAO, the International Association of Assessing Officers, and NACo, and the partnership that we've been developing here in the last year and a half or so. About a year and a half ago, IAAO made the decision to become an affiliate association for NACo, and as such, we get a seat on the board of directors, being an affiliate. And the president of our association, IAAO, at that time appointed me to be on that board since I was vice president. In year one of my 4-year commitment as being an officer for IAAO. So I'm in my 2nd year of serving on the board of directors for NACo. We're really developing quite a partnership. I know the staff liaison that was appointed to us is Dr. Amelia Eistrate. In my opinion, we got the best of the best. She's fantastic to work with, and we've done a lot of good things together, including the dark store methodology evaluation issue that's sweeping the country now, as far as the big box stores trying to get their property assessment lowered using this dark store strategy. So they've helped us get the message out about that, how it's not an appropriate strategy to use. And I know Amelia's also worked with our staff in Kansas City as far as with our research and our library staff on projects as well. So I just wanted to briefly talk about that partnership. I really think you're going to continue to see it flourish in the future, and I think it's going to be to the benefit of both members of IAAO and NACo. IAAO, our mission, we've been around for 83 years, I think. We've been a professional association of assessors. Our primary mission is to promote excellence in property appraisal, assessment administration, and property tax policy, and we do that primarily by providing professional development, providing education, providing research, and technical assistance. So we're all about training people to become competent assessors and staff that work for assessor's office as well. Now, the topic we have today is property tax, sort of not a favorite topic for a lot of people to talk about. I know it's a very complex topic. We only have an hour or so to talk about it, so it's going to skim the top of what the property tax actually is. And part of the issue is every state does property tax just a little bit differently, but there are common components that we share across the United States that are pretty common in every property tax system in every state. So there's also best practices also in those components that we're going to talk a little bit about this afternoon. So I know Amelia told me that, you know, Randy, you're going to be talking to commissioners, so make sure you stay at the 30,000 feet level instead of getting down into the weeds, what assessors really do. So I'm going to try hard to do that and not try to get down in the weeds, which sometimes for me is hard to do. Just a little brief history about the property tax. It's basically been around since civilization began. You can go back many, many years. Back in the old days, wealth was the value of the land. Wealth was the land and the products that came off the land. So generally taxes were paid by a percentage of the products or the produce that the land produced. The earliest known records go back to 6000 BC, property tax records, in an area that would be modern-day Iraq now. But we also know that Egypt, China, Babylon, Persia, property taxes were used throughout all the ancient world. And this is my favorite slide in the whole presentation. In Greece, in ancient Greece, property tax were highly valued officials, and they even erected a monument in honor of the honest tax assessor. So I'm sure Paul and I don't have to worry about anything like that happening to us.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. So why do we have a property tax? What's the purpose of the property tax? If you go back to our founding fathers here in the United States, they recognized the power of taxing people and their property is essential to the very existence of government. And I think you as commissioners and supervisors, I think you all understand that too. It's a very important part of a well-balanced revenue system for a community, whether it's a county or city. And as you well know, it provides revenue to pay for the cost of services you provide your citizens, such as police protection, fire protection, roads, parks, libraries, and so on. It's a more stable revenue source than the sales tax or the income tax, basically because it does not fluctuate when we go through recessions or when individual incomes fluctuate as well. That may or may not be true. I think Paul may disagree with that, fluctuate when communities have recessions. I know Paul lives in a market area where market values, the pendulum swings quite a bit. When the market's going up, the pendulum goes up quite a bit. And when the market goes down, it goes the opposite way just as quick. The market area that I work in Des Moines, is a much more stable market. You know, a very high appreciation rate for a market in my area might be 5 to 6% per year. I know in the Phoenix area, you probably had 30, 40, 50% in 1 year, probably 10 years ago or so. So it's still a more stable tax revenue source than the other two taxes we primarily deal with. It also provides balance and equity in the total tax system by taxing one element of ability to pay that's overlooked by other state and local taxes. You know, in the property tax, it's going to allocate the cost of government according to the ability to pay as measured by your property wealth. So that's going to reach and include broad sectors of your population in sharing those costs to government. It's also the only tax that's used in every state in the United States and here in District of Columbia. Not every state uses the income tax, not every state has a sales tax, but every state has a property tax. Doesn't mean counties collect property tax in every state. Some other entity may be collecting those taxes, but every state does have a property tax. And that, as you know, it's also the most important source of total revenue for local governments. So what are the advantages of the property tax? Like any tax, there's going to be advantages and disadvantages. One of the main advantages is it's stable and it's reliable, very reliable. And the other things that Paul and I know, it's more open and more visible. And in being so, the full magnitude of the tax is obvious to those that pay it. The reason is because you have such large lump sum payments you pay once or twice a year. The magnitude of that tax is really felt versus as your income tax where you're taking a little bit out of your paycheck every week, every 2 weeks. You really don't feel the magnitude of the income tax. The same thing with the sales tax. As you pay sales taxes, you buy goods and services, you may not fully realize the magnitude of the sales tax like you would the property tax. But the advantage of being open and visible is it helps focus attention on and thereby improve the overall accountability of local government. Since it is so open, since it is so visible, And because it is generally levied and administered at the local level, it's really uniquely suited for the needs and structure of local government, and it also promotes local autonomy. Also, the property tax is the only tax that I know of where you have a fundamental right to appeal the basis of that taxation, the property assessment done by your assessor or county appraiser. No other tax that I know of, you have a fundamental right to appeal the basis of that tax. So an appeal system is fundamental to a property tax system. It affords your property owners an opportunity to appeal the assessments made by your assessor or your county appraiser. And key to that system is being open and transparent as possible, the process where you have a clearly written set of procedures, and it truly provides due process to your property owners, to your taxpayers. So the general process in most states, you start out with an informal appeal where you go in and sit down with your local assessor and try to work out differences as far as opinion and value, what the assessment should be. If that doesn't work, then you move up to the next level, which would be you have one or more levels of formal appeal process in place. And then the last option, you usually go into the court of law. Another advantage that makes the property tax real reliable is the taxes can be secured by the property. Therefore, it's very difficult to evade the property tax. And here in the United States, the tax stays with the property. The owner can sell the property and move somewhere else, but the tax stays with the property. So that makes the tax much more reliable because people are going to pay taxes to keep that property. There's also disadvantages of the property tax too. Of course, the big one is it's almost all the time rated by the public as the most unpopular tax out there. And working the front lines like Paul and I do, and Robert, we know that firsthand. It is a very unpopular tax. Part of the reason is it falls on the unrealized capital gains and may or may not be related to cash flow at all or to income. It's also difficult for those that are on fixed income, like retired people, low-income people. Retired people may be property rich, but income poor, so the property tax is very difficult tax for them to comply with. Those large lump sum payments make the magnitude of the tax much more apparent and unpopular as well. It's also a very resource-intensive process. As you know, as commissioners, I would assume most of you commissioners and supervisors control the purse strings for your local assessor's office or your local county appraiser's office, and you know it's a very resource-intensive process. It's not cheap. So in property taxation, our administrative costs are high. You get into income and sales taxation, the compliance costs are high. So on the property tax, the front end costs are high. Sales and income tax, the back end costs are going to be high. So the property tax is an ad valorem tax. Ad valorem means based on value. So the amount of taxes paid that's paid is going to be dependent upon the value of the property owned. So your ability to pay then is going to be measured by your property wealth, has no relation to your income. Historically, ownership of property has been highly correlated with wealth. But in modern times, income has been considered more closely related measure to the ability to pay versus property wealth. It's not unrealistic even today, though, to still suggest that property wealth or property is still a form of wealth. So the ability to pay versus wealth argument, really the property tax is really the only component, it's the only tax that enables the wealth component to be used to pay for the cost of government. The sales tax or the income tax doesn't look at property wealth. And without the property tax, then you're going to have some sectors in the population that would really be exempt from paying for any of the costs of government. I'll give you an example, not to pick on farmers, but farmers. Farmers, a lot of times they pay zero income tax. Their expenses are going to be more than the revenue they have come in. A lot of times the sales tax on their products, their machinery and stuff, they're not charged the sales tax, so there's no sales tax they pay on a lot of stuff. The property tax is really the only tax where they would participate in paying for the cost of government. So that's one of the advantages of the property taxes. It's going to capture some sectors of society that would normally or may not be participating in paying for the cost of your local government. So just a little brief walk through the formula, how property taxes are typically calculated, no matter what state you live in. You know, each taxing jurisdiction develops a budget. The assessor or the county appraiser provides the appraised value for each taxing jurisdiction, and the appraised value times the assessment ratio equals taxable value. That is, if the ratio is less than 100%. In some states, the market value that the assessor estimates is the same as the taxable value. In other states, they're at a fraction of what the assessor estimates. So once you have that, then you take the budget divided by the taxable value. That's going to equal the tax rate. This is going to be a budget-driven property tax system, which is the ideal system. So put that in a sort of a visual thing where you have debt service, add to that education, operating expenses, which you may or may not control in your jurisdiction, plus your agency projected operating expenses, minus your revenue from other sources. That's going to equal the budget revenue that's going to be needed to be raised by the property tax. And that budgeted revenue, then, you're going to divide that by the total taxable value for your jurisdiction, as determined by the assessor or county appraiser. So the budgeted revenue divided by the total taxable value is going to equal your tax rate. And that tax rate then is going to be applied to each individual property owner's tax bill. So if you take the tax rate times the taxable value of each individual property owner's property, that's going to equal their tax bill. So in this basic, this is, again, a budget-driven property tax system. You can see what happens if this total taxable value of property, that is your tax base, that's going to be in your jurisdiction. That's going to be used then to determine your tax rate you're going to apply to your citizens. What happens if that tax base shrinks or decreases and the budget stays the same? Your tax rate's going to go up, right? Tax rate's going to go up. Everybody's taxes are going to go up if that tax base shrinks. The other option is if your tax base shrinks, you're going to have to lower your budgeted revenue if you want to keep the tax rate the same. So there's some give and take there that you as commissioners and supervisors, those are decisions that you have to make when you're developing your budgets. In this tax base box here, I want to keep that in mind, some of the other stuff I'm going to talk about this afternoon. Does anybody know what that is? Huh? It's a waterbed, yes. Those of us that grew up in the late 60s and early 70s, anybody have a waterbed besides me? Okay, we all remember the waterbed where it slushes around. When you push down on one part of the waterbed, what happens to the other parts of the waterbed? Everything goes up, right? That's the exact concept we have going with property tax. When we give preferential treatment to certain property owners, when we start giving out exemptions, when we start give out preferential assessment, all those are designed to shrink this tax base and to give preferential either owners or types of property a preferential treatment in the property tax system. That's going to push down their tax burden. Everybody else's tax burden is going to have to go up, just like a waterbed. When you push down that waterbed, all the other parts of the waterbed goes up. It's the same exact concept when you're dealing with property tax. It's a closed-end system. So when we start talking about preferential treatment for certain types of property or uses of property or property owners. Almost in every one of those cases, you're going to be shrinking this tax base. Keep in mind what that's going to do to everybody else in your property tax system. Just some basic responsibilities of the assessor. We're responsible for determining the value for ad valorem tax purposes. That's our main responsibility. We also have responsibility to two different groups. The first group is the government. You, the local government, you, the county government, also schools, community colleges, hospitals, whoever is in your tax levy, included in your tax levy. We have responsibility to all those local units of government, and we're also part of that too. We play a role in the local government as well, the assessor's office. We also have responsibility to the property owners, our constituents, our taxpayers. We represent them in our capacity as being assessor. As far as our responsibility to our local government, we're obligated by law to produce values that are then utilized by you, the local government officials, that you use to develop the property tax paid to pay for the services that you provide your citizens. So we absolutely have a responsibility to you, the local government entities. But we also have a responsibility on the other side of the coin to the property owners, those in the property tax system. We're obligated to produce values that are accurate, that are fair and equitable, in order to ensure that everyone pays their fair share of the property tax burden. If we give our relation tax breaks and lower their assessment, we're not doing our job. We represent all the property owners in our jurisdiction as well. And that's true too when we go to court on appeals. If somebody appeals their assessment to court and we have to go there to defend our value, we're really representing both the local governments in our jurisdiction, but we're also representing all the other taxpayers in that property tax system. Because like I say, our job is to ensure that everyone pays their fair share of the property tax burden by doing our best at estimating market value of their property. So the duties, we basically have three primary duties. Number one, we got to discover the property. One of the things you get in a property tax system, you got to make sure you capture all the property that should be taxable. You don't want anybody to be missed. Once we discover that property, then we make a listing of the property. Once we capture the listing, then we value the property. So what tools then are available to help us with those three duties? We have CAMA and GIS. Those are acronyms, which probably only 2 or 3 people in here know what they actually mean, maybe 4 or 5. So what does CAMA mean? CAMA means Computer Assisted Mass Appraisal. This is a system for assessing real and personal property with the help of a computer. It's a system of appraising properties, usually only certain types of real property. It incorporates computer-assisted statistical analyses to assist the appraiser in estimating the value. And what does GIS mean? GIS is Geographic Information System. This is a geographic information system, integrates hardware, software, and data for capturing, managing, analyzing, and displaying data on a geographically referenced or on a geographical map. So it's going to be a mapping program and an evaluation program linked together. So these are two components of an efficient and effective valuation system that your assessor is going to need if they're going to do their job to the best of their ability. They're going to need resources to purchase a CAMA system and a geographic information system. So let's look at those three duties to discover the property. Number one, we're going to locate the property. Once we locate it, then we're going to identify the property type. So in locating the property, we're going to use both the GIS system, our mapping system, which includes aerial photography, and our CAMA system, which is going to capture the data characteristics that we capture on properties. That's going to help us locate property. Then once we locate it, we're going to identify it by legal description, by parcel identification number, in other ways. We can also identify it by a point system on a map and so on. So then once we discover the property, again, we discover all property that's taxable, we make sure we miss no property. All property should be taxed. To list the property, we're going to create a list of property characteristics on that property, and then we're also going to determine if it's taxable or not. And this is where we spend a lot of time ensuring that we have quality, accurate data on each single property that we have. It's imperative that our valuation process, that we use accurate data. If we don't have accurate data, then we have GIGO, you have garbage in, garbage out. You're going to have bad valuation estimates if you have bad data. So we spend a lot of time making sure we capture and have accurate data, up-to-date data. So in this case, we're listing the property. You can see just a few of the property characteristics down here. You got square footage, you got age. Again, it's located on the map. It's a one-story ranch between 1,000 and 1,500 square feet. These are different examples of property record cards. Generally, you can go on the assessor's website and look at the data on individual properties, what kind of characteristics we capture. In this case, we have ownership information, land information, general property information, the physical characteristics of the improvement information, sales information, sales history information, permit information, and so on. Valuation history information. So we have all kinds of characteristics that we keep records of on each individual property in our jurisdiction. We also draw a sketch and also have measure the square footages of each one of the uses of that improvement. Your staff is going to be required, as an assessor, you need to have staff that understands construction knowledge, and they also need proper training and proper education on valuation, appropriate valuation techniques to use, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So once you list the property, you're also going to determine the taxability of, is it going to be taxable or not? Is it going to be partially taxed? Those are all decisions made by the assessor or by the county appraiser. In this example, this is a church. Churches are typically exempt in most states. Religious institutions are exempt. So in this case, you still capture the data, but it's going to be not taxed. It's not going to be taxed. Once we capture all the data, and again, emphasize that data needs to be up to date and accurate, then we're going to value the property and the taxable value if the taxable value is something less than 100% market value. So we use three approaches to value, or three methods to value: the cost approach, sales comparison approach, and income approach. And these are typical approaches to value used by appraisers in the appraisal industry. We'll start out with the comparable sales approach. You compare the subject property that you're valuing with other properties that are similar that have sold recently. You're going to be comparing the different property characteristics with the subject property and the comparable sales and make adjustments necessary to account for those differences in those characteristics. So you're going to go out into your jurisdiction and find similar properties to your subject property that have recently sold. You can use a mathematical technique in the software to do this comparable selection for you. We won't get into that at all, but once you can go out and find maybe 5 comparable sales, you're going to make adjustments to account for the differences between the subject property and the comparable sales. For example, subject property is newer and larger, your comparable sales smaller and older. You're going to make an adjustment to that sale price, to that comparable sale, to account for that difference. You're going to do that for a number of differences, number of variables when you make those adjustments. Then you're going to come up with an adjusted sale price for each comparable sale. And of all the adjusted sale prices, you're going to reconcile those into a value estimate for your subject property. So that, in a nutshell, is the comparable sales method.
Hey, Randy, in this case, can you talk about the dark store method and how does it fit into this, because it is the issue of comparable sales. and things like that. Talk about the dark store method. How many of you are facing dark store issues in your county? And if you don't know, Randy's going to tell you.
What we're dealing here with residential homes, but it's the same concept where your subject property, let's say your subject property is a big box store like a Lowe's or a Target or Walmart. They're operating as a large retailer, and all indications are they're going to continue to operate at that location as a large retail, a big box store for many, many years into the future. The dark store methodology that we see as a tax evasion strategy used by the tax reps, where they'll come in and they'll find big box properties where the business moved out and moved to a better location, and this location that they moved out of was no longer feasible, financially feasible to operate as a big box retailer. So when this property sells, the big box stores will also put deed restrictions on what that property can be used after it's sold for. They restrict the use to some secondary uses besides a big box retailer. They're prohibited from using it as a competitor against them. So in doing so, then when those properties sell, they're selling at bargain basement prices because they can't use it as a retail property. Because the location really is not suited to be a big box retailer anymore. So it's a very much lower sale price than what a property that would continue to be operated as a big box retailer would sell for. So the strategy they use then is really to get that adjusted sale price down as low as possible so their tax consequences are going to be a lot lower too. So it actually goes to highest and best use, which is another topic that we won't get into. When you're talking residential property, you're really trying to go out and find property that are being used by single-family occupied owners. Is going to continue to be single-family owner-occupied type houses. And those are the type of properties you want to use as your comparable sales. So the cost approach, this is a second approach or method we use. Basically, it's determine how much is it going to cost to build that house brand new. We're going to minus any accrued depreciation experienced by that improvement. That could be from physical wear and tear. It could be from functional obsolescence. It could be from economic conditions outside the property. If you're located across the street from a railroad track or something. Then the depreciated value of the improvement is going to be added to the land value. That's going to be the value of the property via the cost approach or the cost method. So again, calculate replacement cost new minus any loss in value from accrued depreciation. And to that, you're going to add to the value of the land. That's going to be the value using the cost approach. The income approach is generally used on properties that are income generating properties that they're leased typically. How much income, how much net income would that property rent? What's the potential net income? The assessor goes out and finds similar type properties, what they're being leased for, what their typical expenses are, what their net income. And we're going to take that potential net income for the subject property and divide it by a capitalization rate and come up with an estimated value via the income approach. So those are the three approaches to value that assessors use in your jurisdictions. Notice the duties of the assessor. We do not determine taxes. We don't determine the amount of taxes collected in the jurisdiction, the tax rate, or the individual taxes. Again, our primary responsibility is to find the fair market value for all the property to ensure that everybody's paying their fair share of the property tax burden. Now, mass appraisal is a little bit, mass appraisal is evaluation of a group of properties as of a specific date using common data, standardized procedures, and statistical analysis or testing. The common procedures or the standardized procedures that we use are evaluation models. We'll develop statistical models. Either the cost sales comparison approach, we can develop a statistical model, the cost approach we can, the income approach. So all three approaches we can develop valuation models to help us value large numbers of property all at the same time. So basically a model, all that does is replicate what's happening in the real world, what's happening in your real estate market. We can go out and capture variables that are highly correlated with sale price and put those into a valuation model that we can then use to predict value on property. We also come in on the back end then and we test our value estimates statistically to ensure that our performance as an appraiser is meeting acceptable standards. Again, the role of valuation models to help us increase accuracy, consistency, and most of all, efficiency and effectiveness. It's much more efficient to value a large jurisdiction like Paul's using valuation models versus having his appraisers do an appraisal one at a time and trying to do. So these valuations are very, very helpful when we do mass appraisal. In my state, we have to revalue every odd-numbered year, so every 2 years. Paul, I think you're an annual?
Yeah, annual.
Paul's jurisdiction in Arizona, they have to do it annually, so you have to do this annually. So valuation models are crucial to what we do as far as predicting value or estimating value. And why do we assess every year, every 2 years? Well, real estate markets are dynamic. Market values are constantly changing, not only from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but within a jurisdiction. You may have one part of your county experiencing large amounts of appreciation in property value. A different part of your jurisdiction might be static, not growing at all. Okay, and maybe even a third area may be going down in value too. So it's important that the assessor captures these differences so that market value standard is still applying. Market value, current market value. That's why we go back and we revalue property every year or every odd-numbered year. In doing so, too, it's important that when you revalue, that's going to improve your appraisal performance, which is going to improve your tax equity. It goes back to ensuring that everybody's paying their fair share based on their property wealth, the value of their property. There's a couple components of a high-quality, cost-effective property tax system. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. I'm sort of running low on time, but valuation component and taxation component. It's important that your valuation system maximizes equity among your property taxpayers. It's important that it's visible and open, that you're highly transparent with the work that your assessor is highly transparent with the work that they do. Also, you try to minimize administrative complexity and confusion involved with that valuation system. And again, industry standard is market value as far as valuing property for assessment purposes, for property tax purposes. I know some states have a different standard than market value. Some states may have use value. Are you market value?
Yes.
Yeah, we're 100% market value in my state, but some states have a different definition of value that they use when they assess property. But the IAAO position is market value standard is the standard that should be met. And when you do a current market value standard, that does imply annual reassessments, even though by state statute you may not be required to do that annually. I know some assessors will do it annually, whether they're required to or not by statute. That doesn't mean every property changes value every year. It does mean that it's necessary for your assessor or your county appraiser to observe and evaluate the assessment of each property each year. Again, doesn't necessarily mean that property value changes each year. It's also important that your assessor or your county appraiser has highly skilled and trained professional staff working for them. This is a highly technical area, this valuation models that we do. And so it's extremely important that as you as commissioners provide the resources necessary for your assessor to be able to hire highly trained, highly professional, highly competent staff. Taxation systems, there may be imperfections using property wealth as the ability to pay, so there's some remedies to help alleviate some of those real and perceived public concerns with the property tax. The basic ones that you're going to see from state to state, there's exemptions, there's classification, there's abatements, tax increment financing or TIFs, property tax deferrals, circuit breakers, and tax credits. I'm going to start out with exemptions. Exemptions are really subsidies to certain owners or for certain types of uses of property that are really used to encourage publicly desired objectives. For an example, a church or schools or municipal buildings. The key principle in property taxation is all property is taxed unless it is specifically exempt. And when you start thinking about exemptions, go back to that waterbed example I talked about where you start shrinking your tax base. When you start giving out exemptions in your jurisdiction and lowering the tax burden on those property owners that own the exemptions, everybody else's taxes have to go up to make up for it, to account for it. It's also going to decrease your tax base in your jurisdiction. The exemptions will, so you're going to have two decisions or two options to make as a decision. Do you want your tax rates to go up, or are you going to reduce the services you provide to your citizens to account for that loss in your tax base? You know, Des Moines in my jurisdiction, Des Moines is state capital. We have federal office buildings, we have state office buildings, we have county office buildings, we have city of Des Moines office buildings. We have 3 regional hospitals. At one time, about 40% of the valuation in our jurisdiction in the city of Des Moines was exempt, was not taxable. So you can imagine what the local officials had to do in Des Moines to offset that. They had to raise the tax rate to make up the difference for that. So the tax rate in Des Moines is, you know, much higher than the suburb cities that surround us. So exemptions for every person's loophole is somebody else's rope. Thanks. Am I out of time? Okay. Thanks. And they also you can be a partial exemption or a full exemption. A partial exemption is where just a percentage or fixed dollar amount is removed. An example of that would be like a homestead exemption. Say the first $5,000 are removed from the taxable value and the rest is going to be taxed. That'd be an example of a partial exemption. A full exemption is where the taxable value is going to be zero. Examples of that would be religious institutions, educational property, charitable. Certain charitable properties and societies that are also, they get fully exempt as well. Classification, this deals with like residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural. There could be others depending on what state you're in. Each one of these classification schemes is really designed to give certain classes of property preferential treatment in your property tax system. Application is generally not required. It's going to be a decision of the assessor. Always classification is based on political, not economic conditions. It really leads to confusion in your property tax system. So generally, they're either given a favored percentage of assessed value or a lower tax rate, one or the other, and as far as being given the preferential treatment. Abatements typically forgive all or a portion of property taxes for a specified period of time, so they're not forever. Tax increment financing permits a portion of the property taxes that would be generated based on the new development to be used by the development for expenses associated with infrastructure and improvement construction. They may also be involved in paying off bonds that will be paid that the local jurisdictions took out to help finance the infrastructure cost and so on. Any people use TIF in here in your jurisdiction? Yeah. Works pretty well most of the time. Typically, abatements and TIF are used to attract businesses to economically depressed areas, and then also abatements are used to maybe promote residential use or grant residential property tax relief. They help lessen the startup costs of the new and property-intensive businesses, and both are preferred. Both abatements and TIF are preferred over the classification schemes and the limits on assessment limits. Property tax deferrals just defers the property tax until the property is sold or the estate is settled. I don't know how often these are used. These are primarily limited use, really. Circuit breakers, these are state-funded credits that replaces funding for the local government. They're unlike exemptions. They are funds that are not lost to the local government, so they don't shrink the tax base. They just take a while to get refunded from the state, and it also assumes that the state fully funds it too. They fully fund the credit, which a lot of states won't do that. And tax credits, these are typically allowed in the form of some type of reduced income tax liability on your state taxes. So I just want to touch upon IWL resources that can help you as commissioners and as supervisors. Again, I'll go back to our mission is promote excellence in property appraisal, assessment administration, and property tax policy, and our commitments promote and provide professional development, education, research, and technical assistance. Again, these are to help our members, which are primarily assessors or county appraisers. Our professional development program, we award 6 different designations based on our highest being the CAE, the Certified Assessment Evaluator designation. There's 4 components you have to go through to get a designation. You have to have an experience requirement met, which is typically 3 to 5 years in assessment administration. You have to have qualifying education over 6 or 7 one-week classes you have to take and pass the exam. You also have to do a project demonstration that has to be graded by a peer group, that you demonstrate your competency in assessment administration. Then there's also either a 4 or 8 hour examination that you have to get each one of our designations that we go through. So as commissioners and supervisors, I think you would be looking for people that have the IWO designation. These are people that have proved that they're dedicated, they're committed not only to themselves, but also to this profession that we work in. Also, our education, we have over 50 courses, workshops, seminars, one-day forums that are offered throughout the world, throughout the United States, Canada, and the world, that teach property appraisal, assessment administration, and property tax policy. Our research department, our research library has over a collection of 20,000 books, articles, documents, reports that are available for any type of research you're doing. Our librarian's in the office, Mary Odom. She's fantastic to work with. And also technical assistance. If you're dealing with a specific problem in your jurisdiction and you need someone to turn to for expert advice on how to do it, for over 75 years, we've been providing objective, insightful advice on property assessment and taxation to jurisdictions around the world. And so if you ever in need of some type of specialized advice or consulting work, we have a technical assistance department that can help you as well. You can also go to our website, iwo.org. Some of the resources online, a research library, our publications. We do have professional standards of practice that we would hope that your assessors would adhere to. We also have surveys. One of the most recent surveys we're just getting ready to come out is a salary survey that you can use and compare the salaries that you're paying your local assessor or county appraiser compared to what assessors across the United States are getting paid. So that's going to be out here in the next month or two, I think. March 1st, okay. So that'll be available to you if you're concerned on how you're paying your assessors and their staff in their office back home. That would be a good resource for you to look at. We also have public resources available for property owners to come in and see how property taxes are calculated, understanding your property assessment, and so on. All of our members adhere to the IAAO Code of Ethics. These are the highest ethical standards we believe in the industry. What we do, public trust, is extremely important. It's the foundation of our credibility as assessors and county appraisers. So, in closing, property tax is a mainstay of independent local government revenue. It's the largest single local tax. Supplies nearly half of all general revenue from local sources. Believe it or not, it is a good tax. It's stable, it's efficient, it's fair, it's highly visible, attracts more attention than any hidden levy tax that we have. And the visibility, we believe, carries with it accountability. So, and the valuation process is central to the improvement of the property tax and the more equitable distribution of its burden. So we're trying to emphasize providing resources for your local assessor or county appraiser, we think is going to pay dividends down the road for you in terms of having fair and equitable assessments. And this tax will always be subject to vigorous debate. Can't get away from that. So with that, I'm done. I know if anybody has any questions, we'd be glad to answer them. I know Paul has some questions too.
How much time do we have?
I got 4 minutes after.
Does anyone have any questions? I was just going to add real quick, one of the things I've been tasked with the assessors to do more with less. So for those of you who are supervisors here, let me give you some evidence, and I can only point to my county. The high valuation for a single-family home in Maricopa County in 2008 was $229,500. And the notices I just sent out this year, we hit $197,600, and it was at a low of almost $100,000. So that shows you the swings that we had. All right, so we've almost recovered. It's taken 10 years, and we've almost recovered. But from a staffing standpoint, and this is what I want you all to think about, maybe we can take a question on this or just go home and think about it. We had 380 employees at the height, and then the bottom fell out, and everyone had to tighten their belts, and now I have 300 people. Yet, we have more parcels to deal with, more work. So what I've tried to come up with is, because my board has told me, Paul, we can't give you more money. But you still got to do more work. You still got to pick up the new parcels. You got to pick up the new property. So what do we do about it? And I've really turned to technology to try to do some of those things. In Maricopa County, I know in Bernalillo County, who's here, we use, it's called Assessment Analyst Program. And it's been very effective. And I can give you the numbers later. We don't have to talk about it now. But we're seeing a huge return on our investment, as high as 8 to 1. And what I mean by that is, as an assessor, we're supposed to go out and pick up new property or recanvass. And it wasn't happening. So instead of sending a body out, and if you think about it, I have 1.7 million parcels and 300 people, and 200 of those are appraisers. That's literally impossible to get all the work done. And to go look at a house, that's not going to happen. So how do we do it? We do it through obliques, aerial photography, and we have a sophisticated computer system that helps us accomplish more work with what we've done. So those are some of the things we're doing. We have online appeals. We're actually, for the first time, doing a pilot project where people who are appealing, and there's everyone who signed, this has shocked me, drones, okay? We're going to send drones out on residential appeals. I don't know what it costs. Maybe next year I'll come back and give you guys an idea of how that worked. But it's an option. I'm not going to send some robot flying over someone's house in Arizona, right? First of all, I probably won't be elected in 4 years if I do that. And second of all, they would shoot it, all right? But I was surprised that of the people who had the option to sign up, everybody has. I mean, of the appeals we've had, 100% have opted in. Interesting, right? So let's see how that works, because then we can get real-time data without sending an appraiser out and capture all the data we need, bring it back, it's instantly transmitted to our office, and we can mark up the appeal. Those are ways that I'm trying to continue to provide good service for Maricopa County without asking for more money. So, whether I'm successful or not, only time will tell, and I appreciate Randy for giving us the background. If you have any questions for us on either anything Randy said or I've said, now's the time, if we have time left.
There's one other thing I forgot to bring up that Paul, working through the legislative process in your jurisdiction and getting an IAAO designation, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, so we had a bill in the legislature that's not fully through yet. Other states do allow for increased consideration if an appraiser, for example, takes the steps to get the additional training necessary, like obtaining an IAAO certification. So it's a may, not a shall, and it's, there's some mostly, in my opinion, pros, but there's some cons for if you're a supervisor, does that apply to everybody? How does that work? But really, my issue is, let me put it to you this way, everyone, all right? I sit in a room with my employees, 10 of them, 6 of them can retire today. So my issue in Maricopa County is, number one, how do I attract people to stay with me? Number two, how do I keep them there when we're already paying them under market? And this is one avenue that we can do that, is show them that if they want to put in the time, and it's rigorous to obtain an IAAO certification, that we can compensate them for that. Because truthfully, nobody wakes up in the morning when they're 18-year-old and said, I want to be an appraiser for my career. I certainly did not. I don't know if you did, Randy. Okay, he didn't. he hesitated. So that's one of the things we're doing, but I appreciate the chance to speak to all of you today.
Any other questions? Great. Thanks a lot, everybody. Appreciate it.